Welcome. So today's word for our Advent words is the word smooth, and I'm using a picture of this desk behind me. I'm not much of a woodworker. I've never really had much experience with this, but I made this last summer. Ariana helped, as you can see in some of the pictures I'll show, but it's about as smooth as you can get for a piece of wood, especially a rough cut burl wood from the mountains. And I want to read the passage that this word smooth comes from, specifically from Luke chapter 3, quoting the scroll of the prophet Isaiah in Luke chapter 3, verse 5. Every valley will be filled, and every mountain and hill will be leveled. The crooked will be made straight, and the rough places made smooth, and all humanity will see God's salvation. This is the voice of John crying out in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, the same place where we got the word wild and the word rough, and now the word smooth. But to make the path smooth is not an easy process. I remember when I first got this piece of wood, found it for about $50, just the raw wood out in Maggie Valley. And I couldn't pass it up. I figured even if I can't do anything with it, even if I end up destroying it, it's $50. Whereas a coffee table like this can go for thousands. And I never saw a desk made this way. So I figured, why not? I'll give it a shot. YouTube videos, just kind of work the whole process from the sanding down, the epoxy filling, all of this work to get the sort of the river look and filling all these valleys and cracks and smooth it out. Just layer after layer. And then what became even more frustrating is that when you start getting into the epoxy, you find that you have to build up layer after layer. And then you have to sand down over that to get the residue off of the wood. And there were some layers that I thought, it's ruined. There's no way I'll be able to get it ground down enough. Especially with the blue paint in the epoxy, some of that blue would get deep into the grain of the wood, and I'd have to kind of start all over with the roughest sandpaper and gradually work down to smoother layers over and over and over again for several months on that process. But now, as I sit here and I enjoy this desk and I use it sort of as a writing desk for journaling, just a place to be kind of set apart from my computer and my work world over there. Just being at the desk, just seeing it, is a constant reminder of that process of smoothing, that process of refining, and that there are times when it doesn't look like it's even going to be possible. That it looks like it's just too roughed up, too messed up, too many mistakes made, and it'll just never be smoothed out. And somehow, eventually, it is. And then there's another added layer to that, in that not only is it this building up of layers and smoothing out and grinding and sanding and all of this process, but if you think about the process of smoothing roads, for example, I learned that roads require a certain weather condition to be able to pave. And so there's a road out front of Mackenzie's Church outside of Central, a Methodist in Spencer, that is torn up because of construction that was being done underneath the road, and they planned on finishing it before the winter came, but now that the cold has hit, turns out you can't pave it. You can't smooth it. So they're going to leave it as good as possible with sort of this under layer, but they can't put a top smooth surface of asphalt until the spring when the temperatures are right. And so sometimes smoothing out those rough edges requires just the right conditions. And I think that's also like our lives, that God goes through this process of grinding down those rough edges that can sometimes be sharp and harm and hurt others even when we don't intend to. But that sometimes we have to wait for the conditions to be right to do it. I had to wait for good weather outside because the dust and everything in the basement was just too much. The stain fumes, all of that in the basement. I had to wait until the weather was right outside. They can't pave the road until the weather is warm enough. The right conditions have to be in place. And sometimes that smoothing process means that we've got some work to do inside to make the conditions right, to put ourselves in the path of God's grace, as it were, to put ourselves under the sandpaper, under the grinder, to allow ourselves to be smoothed, to allow our lives to be shaped and formed and fashioned into the image of Christ. And sometimes that grinding and that sanding and that layering to get something smooth is a painful process. Ever had a crown put on a tooth? The crown wasn't that bad. All the work that went into it, pain was gone within a day. But the bite being adjusted, something as simple as that little bite being just a nudge off. And if you've ever had a crown done, or you've ever had any kind of dental work that requires that grinding and that smoothing to get the bite right, you know what I'm talking about. I can't imagine being the wood underneath the sander. All that this piece of wood went through to get to this place. Maybe that's why C.S. Lewis describes pain as the smoothing process, as the process of perfecting. When he describes human beings as a masterpiece, a work of art, and wishing that we were just a rough pencil sketch, just a quick little sketch that nobody really cared about, just going to go kind of all off to the side, quick little sketch, no big deal, but didn't need all of that erasing and fine-tuning and touching and layering over like a masterpiece would require. If we're honest, we don't always want to be smoothed out. We like our rough edges. Like we talked about yesterday, they protect us. They make us feel safer, less vulnerable. But the process is part of becoming whole, part of being restored. You can't get past the pain of those rough edges in your life and in your heart without allowing the grinding and the sanding, without allowing God to come in and making the conditions of our heart just right for Him to make the path smooth, for Him to smooth out our hearts. And so I pray this Advent is a season that we can continue to make the conditions right, to put ourselves in the path of God's grace, to allow Him to keep grinding and sanding and layering. And even if we're in a season where it looks like the layers have been built up and it's just a total mess, know that God, who began a good work in you through the Holy Spirit, will continue it, will perfect it, will complete that good work until you and I are fully restored in the image of Christ. And so let's pray. Heavenly Father, we don't like the process of having our rough edges smoothed out. It feels threatening, it feels painful, it makes us feel vulnerable. There are times in the process where the conditions aren't right and we just have to wait. We don't want to wait. We want it to be paved over now, just get it done with. There are times when it looks like it'll never be able to be smoothed out. When it looks like just too much of a mess. Lord, it's never too rough for you. Fill in the valleys. Smooth out the hills. Make straight your path for us, that we might walk in your way. In Jesus' name.